Hi, my name is Steve Wilson. I'm with the Illinois State Water Survey at the U of I, and we manage the private well class. And today we're doing a webinar on funding and financing options for private well owners. I do want to mention that we're funded through the US EPA by the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, RCAP, and I'll describe them and our program a little more as we move through today. Okay, so it's part of a national program implemented through RCAP to support well owners, and there's 6 regional affiliates, if you will, all have private well staff that also work on this program. And this video is this webinar is being recorded, and so it'll be available in a few days, both on privatewellclass.org and our YouTube channel. If you have questions today that are, so the questions you submitted in advance, we'll answer some of those at the end. They're actually part of the slide deck. But if you have questions today, as we go through the material, we ask that you use the question box or the chat box on your GoToWebinar menu to put questions in there. Katie's monitoring that, and she'll make sure we're creating a list, and we'll bring those up at the end and go through them. So, and the last thing I want to mention is we are still working from home, and so there may be, we haven't had much issue with internet, but there could be. People are still mowing their yards here. I have a daughter who's in school who may decide to come downstairs in the middle. And so all those things just keep in mind as we move through today. Okay, well, that seems to be a better way to do this. If you're an environmental health professional and you want CEs for today from NEHA, the rule is you have a 2-year credentialing cycle. So the example I put up here, if your credentialing cycle just started October 1, you can take this class today. Then if we offer it again, it won't be available for credit to you until after 10/1/22. So the last time and the only other time we've offered this webinar was on 3/21/19, as it shows in the lower left or lower right corner. And so if you participated in that and got CEUs for it, and you're still under the same credentialing cycle you were then, you won't be able to get credit for it again. But you can email us if you want a certificate or the copy of the slide deck and at info@privatewellclass.org. And also if you're in Illinois, LAHP, since we are in Illinois, we are an accreditor for CEs here. Yeah, hopefully that helps everybody some. So a little bit about RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. They're a national nonprofit that works mostly on water and rural infrastructure type issues. So they have staff who are licensed EHPs, also mostly I would say water and wastewater operators, and they work in every state in the country. There's about 200 staff total among the 6 regional affiliates. And so if you're, this is important for us here because 3 of these, at least 3, have or will be providing loans, low interest loans for private well owners as part of the USDA program that we're going to hear about today from USDA. And I'll show, we'll show Derek Jones is here from USDA who runs that program, and we'll talk about who all the recipients are that have dollars to provide. And so I know RCAC Communities Unlimited and Southeast Rural Community Assistance Partnership called CERCAP all have loan programs that are available. And we'll describe those in more detail. But they also do a lot of other things related to private wells. They hold workshops for both well owners and professionals, especially EHPs. And then we have a well assessment program, which an assessment is a detailed one-on-one. Someone comes to your home and we'll go through, look at your well, find information about your log, all of that stuff, and then make recommendations to you about things you need to be concerned about if there are any vulnerabilities. If you have an older well that maybe doesn't meet code, just tell you why this is a risk or isn't a risk and all that stuff. RCAP has completed about 2,400 of these around the country so far. They do about 400 or 500 a year. And it's really a great way if there's really a problem well, if you're with a local health department or a state health department and you have a well owner contact you and your staff just don't have the wherewithal to go out and investigate every one of those, this is a place where you might want to consider partnering with one of the RCAP affiliates. They can help in that respect. I know the Rhode Island Department of Health has leaned on RCAP solutions a few times to go out and work with a well owner to try to get a better idea of what their problem is. And so it's a great program. And again, all of this is funded by US EPA to support well owners around the country and protect source water, really. I forgot to mention, I'm trying to get over a cold. The only thing I have left is a cough. And as I talk more today, we're going to have some issues probably, and I apologize for that, but we'll all just muddle through. So I work at the State Water Survey, and so does Katie. It's an agency that was formed in 1895 in the state of Illinois. It's a sister agency to our State Geological Survey and Natural History Survey, but it was formed specifically back then because of cholera and typhoid outbreaks. And so the first job of the Water Survey was to investigate the water quality of most of the communities in Illinois, and also try to figure out what was going on and why these problems were happening. And a lot of those outbreaks were because of unsanitary conditions in a community. Either they weren't sewered or their water supply wasn't properly protected. And from that, we've grown into really a research arm of the state that provides a lot of information for well owners and community water supplies in Illinois. We house the state's well logs. So if a well owner in Illinois is interested in their well log, they can contact us and we'll find a copy if there is one. We also have a public service lab that does private well sampling that was completely free to any Illinois well owner until 2008 for inorganics and metals. And so we've got a long history. This is our 125th anniversary. And so that's our background. I wanted to just show a couple things from our files. I'm also in charge of all of our outreach for the whole survey. And so we've been going through our old records and finding really cool stuff, like cool in the respect of the work that was done then. Not that it's cool that there were typhoid cases in Pana, Illinois in 1916, but this is an investigation we did for Pana, where there was an outbreak of typhoid, and it ended up, the community had a water treatment plant they just built, but they weren't using it because the mayor said it was too expensive to run. And that sounds familiar even today. And also only half the town was sewered. So our scientists went in there expecting to find one of those issues at the heart of all this, and it turned out that the Pana Ice Cream Company, where the arrows are there in the middle, was also the source of milk for most of the town. And 7 different farmers brought their milk in, dairy farmers, and it all went into one large tank with a bucket that was hanging off the side that everybody used to get the milk out. And that was the source of the typhoid in town. So it's just a cool story, and there's old newspaper articles related to this and everything else that tell the whole story of this particular issue. This is another picture from our files. This is just a young man helping one of our scientists take a water quality sample. This is in New Athens, Illinois in 1913. Our files are full of this old stuff, and it's really interesting to see the background and where we've come from. And I like to show that here because most people have never heard of the Illinois State Water Survey. Unlike state geological surveys, which there's one in every state, Illinois and Oklahoma are the only 2 states that have a water survey. It's specifically geared towards water issues in their state. So getting to today's webinar, again, my name's Steve Wilson. I'm a groundwater hydrologist. And so mostly source water work, looking at aquifers and trying to protect those and find out why there's naturally occurring contaminants. That's a lot of the work that I've done in my career. And then outreach through like our private well program. We're able to work nationwide, and it's been really useful and rewarding to do this type of effort. Today we have a guest, Derek Jones, who's a community program specialist with the rural development at USDA. He's in charge of the private well loan program, probably some other things as well. That's how I know him. Not only does he work with the grantees that get funding to provide these loans, but he's also able to answer your questions. And he's someone who, like, we had a private well conference in 2019, and Derek was gracious enough to come and give a presentation to all the folks who attended about those programs. And the message I have for everyone today is, if you are in a position where you're trying to help well owners and not a well owner yourself, find out if there are any nonprofits in your area that could actually apply to this program. They can be as small as a county, can be as large as nationwide. And he's going to talk about that in a little bit. And Katie Buckley, who's usually on these with me, she's taking your questions today. She does all the logistics for the CEs and basically just keeps me in line. And so, yeah, that's who we have today. So 3 things I always like to tell well owners: just remember that, wells are not regulated like a community water supply is. So the Safe Drinking Water Act requires a community water supply to make sure their water's safe and you pay every month. I grew up on an old dug well in the middle of nowhere in central Illinois, and now I live in a community where I pay $40 to $50 a month. And actually, this number's old now that my daughter's getting a little older. It's more like $60 or $70 a month. But that's a cost spread out over the 150,000 residents or 50,000 homes or so that are here to maintain water. So when I turn on my tap, I always have pressure. I know it's safe to drink, and all that's being taken care of for me. But you as a well owner, that's your responsibility. And so, they aren't regulated after they've been installed in almost every jurisdiction. And there are some rules have changed related to the sale of a home, like in New Jersey and Rhode Island, and I think Oregon. But in a lot of places, once it's installed and the well's in place, it's up to you as the owner to make sure that the water's safe and you always have water pressure and all your equipment's maintained and all those things. So, and the thing to remember is, a lot of folks say, well, my water looks great, tastes great, smells great. Many contaminants like arsenic, which is a common natural occurring contaminant in the Earth's crust, is colorless, odorless, and it has no taste. So there's no way to know that you have arsenic in your well water unless you are in the groundwater in your area, unless you ask and test. And that testing message is something we really try to promote. It's believed that nearly 2/3 of well owners in the country have never tested their well. And that's the first step if you want to be sure your well water's safe and you should be drinking it and your family should be. So what our program really tries to get to is helping well owners understand that they don't know much about their wells and they need to learn. And so you need to find your well log. There's, every state has an organization that maintains logs. You need to know where your water's coming from, what depth it's coming from, what your pump's set at. If you have a screen or not, means whether you have a drilled well or whether you have a sand and gravel well or a bedrock well. Many areas of the country have naturally occurring contaminants, and we discuss this in our class, not on these webinars, and depends on the webinar, but there's a lot of information available to you if you go through that stuff, and it helps you learn more even about what questions to ask and who you can contact locally so that you are better informed and a more knowledgeable well owner, because it really takes some wherewithal to manage your well properly, and that's one of the take-home messages for our class. And also then again, sample your well. There's the only way to really know is sample. Some people say, well, I pour bleach down my well every month because someone told me that was the way to protect my well. That does nothing to protect your well in reality. And there's still a lot of ways that things could be in your well. There's things that chlorine doesn't affect, like arsenic. And so it's a matter of understanding all those issues. Okay, so today we're going to focus on funding and financing for private wells. And there's a lot of cost to being a private well owner. And a lot of folks want to be private well owners. They like where they live. Maybe they're even off the grid per se, or they want to be independent. But then you have to realize if you're going to have that lifestyle, you also have these responsibilities. If there's any kind of components that go bad or your well goes bad, you have to replace it. You have to sample your water regularly. You definitely, that should be a requirement, not something you do once in a while. And then also protecting your well from other sources. If you have any old abandoned wells on your property or your septic system is too close to your well, then those things can become issues depending on how your well is drilled, how deep it is, and all that stuff. And then if you also have treatment, even a softener or a filter, you have to maintain that stuff, and you have to do the legwork and spend the funds to keep it properly maintained. I had one of the Minnesota Department of Health field guys who works with private well owners directly tell me that I shouldn't even teach about treatment in our class, because he finds more times than not that people don't maintain their treatment system, whatever it might be, a filter or RO, whatever it is, and it ends up being a source of contamination, because if it's a filter, it can build up bacteria eventually if it's not replaced and all that sort of stuff. So maintenance is one of the things we really stress if you're going to have any kind of treatment, because if you don't maintain it, you could be causing more problems for your drinking water than you're helping. And what I find, and this is just with my experience, I won't assume to be the most knowledgeable guy in the world about wells, but I've been working with them for 32 years. is that many well owners really don't understand all those responsibilities. And I can give you dozens of examples of where people have made decisions where they have no idea that they needed to do that, or don't even understand that they're on a private well and how that's different from a community water supply. And so it's really up to you as a well owner to become knowledgeable and to learn these things. And our class is hopefully there to help you get started. So one thing I want to talk about before we get into the financing is correcting poor construction. I mentioned a lot of well owners really don't have the knowledge they need to take care of their wells. That's one of the two things that I find are the biggest problems related to wells. It's not PFAS or lead or flooding or anything other issues that come up and are in the news. It's that a lot of wells, when a state passes a well construction code, they grandfather in any older wells. So the old wells don't have to meet the new code. And so every time the code's changed, which is fairly frequently depending on the state, those old wells are still able to be the way they are. And a lot of folks assume that groundwater is just safe, which isn't true. And so these wells with poor construction are the source of contamination. They're not protective at the surface. We have a lot of hand dug wells around the country. The one I grew up on was only 14 foot deep, and it was in a ravine. And it was, my grandpa hand dug it in 1933, and it was just uncemented brick. When it rained really hard, we had cloudy water, which means surface water is directly getting into our well, and it's not safe to drink at all. My dad always swore it was, and that's the way I grew up. There's two problems with these wells that aren't properly protected at the surface. They can be a safety hazard, as well as surface contamination can get in the well. Here's two extreme examples. The first one on the left is from the Washington State Department of Ecology. I show this image a lot. It's from their blog. They are the agency in Washington State that regulates well drillers, well construction code, and private wells. And so they have a blog where they show information. And this is this old well that is just a big tile with a submersible on top here, or the suction pump on top. There's just a piece of plywood over that, and the person who lived there may have walked on that 1,000 times, but this time it broke and she fell in and it killed her. But if you look at this well house, there's a concrete block there that's supposed to go over that hole, and there's a funnel sitting there for who knows what, probably put oil in the pump. But you can see all the old insulation on the ground, and it's probably not airtight, so there's mice or other things that can get in there. And all that stuff falls into the well. And it's not the kind of thing you'd want to drink. Now, the picture on the left, that is disgusting. It's a dead goat. And this is a well that was in southern Illinois. You can see down, they put a concrete tile to try to protect it near the surface at some point, which is sticking up out of the ground, but not far enough for this goat not to fall in it. And you can see down below that there's a lot of old brick there. That's an old stone hand dug well. And this well was no longer in use, but it had been. And it's why you need to have your well sealed at the surface. And we've, same thing over the years. I remember a colleague and I sampled a well that had a brick missing. It had, it looked like an old wishing well with just the old red bricks around it. And one of those bricks was missing right at land surface. And when we looked down in there, there's several frogs in the well. And these people were drinking the well water, no idea. And, it's just not something we want to do if we care about our family's health. So what should you do? And it gets to, I realize there's a cost to all this. You need to bring it up to code if you can. Find out what the well construction code is in your state. I'll point out there are 2 states without well construction code, which is kind of a travesty these days, but it's based on state legislature and the need to protect things. Some states are a little more, landowner centric and don't want to pass rules that landowners have to follow. But Pennsylvania, Alaska still don't have code, although Alaska has really been working hard to get that changed. And I know in Pennsylvania, their extension program is really robust and helpful to well owners because they don't have well construction code. And so they have a huge outreach program in Pennsylvania through their university extension that helps educate well owners in their state. And I know they've tried for years to get the state legislature there to pass such a law, and there isn't one. But here's what you can do. Find out what the construction code is in your state, or look at several, honestly, because it doesn't mean you have to follow the one just in your state. You want to do what's safe, but extend the pipe up to the surface if you have a pit, and install a pitless. If you're in a northern climate, a pitless adapter is something that can go in your well to elbow your water line into the house down below a frost line. And in the old days, before the pitless adapter was invented, a lot of homes had wells that were basically cut off 3 or 4 feet below land surface and were in a pit. And a lot of problems with that, especially when there's rain and everything else. And so talk to your local well authority, your county, local health district, or extension to find out what the best approach is for your well to bring it up to code and to seal it at the surface so you don't have surface contamination getting in your well. Number of years ago, this is probably four years old, but I still use it because it was a fair amount of work, and it's still relevant because it shows relative costs here. Katie called, I asked her just to call 7 or 8 states to go to the NGW's website, has a list of contractors in every state, well contractors, and said, just pick one. Ask them what it costs to drill a 300-foot well in their state. And I think I said with steel casing, although some didn't do steel casing and they only did PVC and things like that. But you can see the range of costs depending on where you live. And California, especially since the drought, they have it's $40,000 or more to drill a well. And a lot of times they have a lot of wells, which is unusual, where they've actually just went dry because now the water level in the ground is below where their well was finished. And so these folks maybe have a 300 or 400-foot well, and now they're looking at drilling one that's at least 500 or 600 feet deep in order to get to a water supply again. And so it's really expensive. And you'll see here, one of the things I talk about later is RCAC, the Rural Community Assistance Corporation, which is based in California and serves, I think, 15 Western states. They have a program that's funded by the state of California to provide loans to people in California specifically because of this issue. So, but it can really range in costs. So funding issues, well owners are, like I said before, everyone's responsible for their well. And so I mentioned here, just leading up to what Derek's going to talk about, the USDA is really the only quasi-national or national program that provides funds to well owners for their wells for repair replacement. There are some local or state programs for assistance, but they're varied, and we're going to go through some of those today. But it becomes, in some states, they don't offer that stuff because it's considered a private property issue. What you do on your private property is your business, and the state doesn't get involved. And so that includes providing funds for ensuring the water's safe and your well works and all those things. And so, and it's very expensive, as we just showed. And, it depends on where you're at. Even at a local level, sometimes there's opportunities for loans or cost share or grants, and we'll go through some of those. And so, and I left this slide in because a lot of the stuff today, these 3 folks, Derek and then Margaret Martins from the Water Systems Council and the Executive Director and Program Director for the Waterwell Trust, as well as Cindy Elliott, who was a loan officer at RCAC, and now I believe she's retired, provided a lot of information for this presentation when I originally put it together. And like I said, mentioned Derek had spoke at our conference, so did Cindy and Margaret, about their programs for funding private wells. And there's no way to sugarcoat it, but a lot of us couldn't afford to put in a new well if we had to. But if your income doesn't meet certain restrictions, many of these programs won't be available for you. And that's just the way it is. And so we'll talk about some of that here a little further down, but I wanted to mention, we recorded our entire conference in 2019 and 2017, and you can find those on our YouTube page or our website. And if you have problems finding those, there's 26 talks that were at each conference, 2.5 days, and they're all information meant to help you as a local provider and someone who works with well owners to provide information that'll help you do your job and support well owners in your area. And so it really wasn't a conference for private well owners. It was really for those that work with them and professionals in the groundwater and public health industries. So with that, we're gonna switch over, and Derek's gonna talk about his USDA programs. So Derek, it should be yours. You hear me okay still?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right.
So I want to welcome everyone to my part of the presentation. I want to thank Steve and Katie for inviting me to talk a little bit about our program. Through the USDA Rural Development, our water and environmental programs, we have our Rural Decentralized Water System grants. You may be familiar with it under its former iteration of the Household Water Well System grant, but due to the Farm Bill, we've changed the name to the DWS or Decentralized Water Systems Grant. Now, basically, this program it assists qualified nonprofits and tribal organizations in establishing a lending program to assist well owners with the repairs or replacements of their wells. And it increases also access to clean, reliable water for households in eligible rural areas. As Steve mentioned, this is a large problem that we're seeing is that people just, since the water is clear or semi-clear, they think that the water is okay, but we want to make sure that they have access to clean and reliable water. Also, we help them to construct, refurbish, and service these wells. One of the interesting things is that this is one of the most searched programs on under rd.usda.gov. It's an annual grant program that we get an allocation from Congress for. We just finished our FY20 cycle, so those grants that got approved started operating October 1 of this year. This particular program is not designed for individual homeowners. It's designed for nonprofit organizations, and they in turn work with the homeowner to assist them in determining if their well needs to be repaired or it needs to be replaced. And they will also help them and assist them in financing those repairs or replacements. And we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. Now, who can apply? We talked about this, nonprofits and tribes. This is they have to have an expertise or experience in handling relending programs. So we want to make sure you have some experience in dealing with managing loans, even though they may be smaller loans. As Steve mentioned before, we have some small grantees that focus on one or two counties. We also have this year, we have a nationwide grantee that services 47 states. So there's a wide variety as far as capacity, even within our grantees, but they need to show that experience. Now, when we talk about the actual loan to the well owners, the maximum loan per well is $15,000. The maximum term is 20 years and the interest rate is 1%. So these are very low interest loans for the actual well owner to get these repairs done. As the grantee, there is a 10% matching that the grantee applicant must demonstrate to assist in establishing the loan program. Now, historically, as you can see, our levels for this particular program were right about $1 million nationwide between 2016 and 2018. 2019, we received 2.3, and in 2020, we received $6.4 million. So we can see the significant increase in this program and the interest that it's attracting. So we can tell that people are really getting behind this program and really are trying to invest funds into this program so that we can reach the actual well owners and assist them in getting their wells brought up to code and making sure that they have that clean and reliable water. As you can see, the $1 million, if you think about it, $1 million nationwide is not a lot of money, but it has been able to have a significant impact for those who have been able to apply for the loans and receive funding for the program. Now, we mentioned earlier how this program actually changed. It was the Household Water Well program since this initial excuse me, it was the Household Water Well program from its initial conception, and it recently was changed to the Rural Decentralized Water System Grant, and that was because of the 2018 Farm Bill. The 2018 Farm Bill had a lot of changes to the program, but it they were great changes for the program, and it actually helped the program to increase accessibility to funds for well owners. One of the things they did was increase the maximum loan amount that well owners could receive from $11,000 to $15,000. Now, and then also now they're able to fund septic systems in addition to wells. One of the things that we have noticed is that if your septic system is close to your well, or if it isn't properly maintained, you have that possibility of that septic system leaching over into your well if your well isn't properly maintained either. So even if we corrected the well issue, if we did not correct the septic system issue, then you're bound to have that same problem resurface. So under the Farm Bill, what we were able to see is that now we can address both of those issues. One of the other things was the eligibility change from 100% of the median non-metropolitan household income to 60%. And the goal behind that was to make sure it gets those disadvantaged groups that have not historically been able to receive funding. So we wanted to make sure that these dollars went to those who really needed it. And also the last thing was the ability to administer sub-grants to the decentralized water system owners. So what this would mean that, for instance, if you had needed to redo your well and it was $16,000 instead of $15,000, and we could only do 15, what would happen is typically either you would have to come up with that $1,000. Sometimes the the well drillers would be able to carry that cost, and you would pay them. Sometimes our well drillers just aren't in a position to do that, depending on how much that gap is. But due to the Farm Bill change, what we're able to do now is to offer sub grants to bridge that gap between that $15,000 and $16,000, just as an example. So that's a great opportunity for those who did not have access to those funds. We mentioned at the beginning that our FY20 grants just started October 1. As you can see, we have 5 grantees who receive funding for FY20, which runs from October 1st of 2020 to September 30th of 2021. That's Communities Unlimited, Golden Triangle, Living Better Tomorrow, SIRCAP, and Waterwell Trust. And we also have listed the corresponding areas that they are focusing in. And if you notice, Waterwell Trust is a nationwide grant. This is one of their proposals this year is to be nationwide as opposed to focusing in certain states. Now, these grantees were awarded under the previous regulation of the household water well. So some of those items that we mentioned in the Farm Bill, as far as raising that limit and also the sub grants, they're not eligible under this cycle of grants. They will be eligible under the next cycle of grants, the FY21 grants. So in addition to this, we also have 4 grantees who received extensions from their previous grant cycle to continue working under FY20. And those groups are RCAC, Great Lakes RCAP, San Luis Valley, and also Waterwell Trust again. So RCAC is one of the RCAP affiliates that works on the West Coast, and Great Lakes RCAP, as Steve mentioned, is in Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Wisconsin. And San Luis Valley is focused in small 2 counties in Colorado. So these still have the opportunity, because one thing we realized is because of the pandemic, a lot of them weren't able to really get out and market the program. They weren't able to really get those applications processed due to being quarantined in certain states. So we gave them an extension for them to continue to use those funds to try to help those well owners as they proposed in their grant application. Now, we're going to save the questions for later, Steve's going to go through questions, and Katie's going to help us with the chat as far as questions that we have later. But this is my contact information. So if you do have questions, if you wonder, hey, how do I get in contact with these nonprofit organizations? We encourage you to go to our website, www.usda.gov, and under rural development, you'll see the Rural Decentralized Wastewater System Grant Program, and we have a fact sheet that's available for you there. Just a brief, I can show you, this is our fact sheet for our Rural Decentralized Water Systems Program. It gives you information, how to apply, other requirements, and it also, as we're updating the information since we have the new grant cycle, we will have all the grantees and the areas that they service. So we really want to thank you so much for listening to what we have to offer. In addition to the Rural Decentralized Water Systems Program, under our Rural Housing Service, we have a 504 program, and I think Steve is going to talk about that in a little bit.
Yep.
But we do have the opportunity to help those who truly need assistance in regards to their wells, because what we really want to do is make sure that people are able to stay on their properties and really continue to live on their property as they feel safe, most safely to be able to do that. Steve mentioned it, and I hate to keep referring back to him, but
It's all
Steve
good.
mentioned how he grew up in Illinois on a family farm, and we want you to be able to continue to do that. If that's where your family has been, your dad, your granddad, and generations of your family, we want you to continue to be able to do that in a safe and reliable environment that you can have all the utilities that you would normally have in an urban setting. So as this time, I'll turn it back over to Steve and
Yeah,
allow
I
him to
think I can make
continue.
myself presenter. So
All right.
there we go. So quickly, not to ask questions now, but I want to make it clear to everybody that 5 of the 6 RCAP regions currently, because 2 are extended from the previous year and 3 are extended from the previous year. No, I take that back. There's 4 listed: Communities Unlimited and CERCAP, or I think CERCAP now for this 20 to 21, and that'll the FY20 grants go from October 1, 20 to September 30, 21. I think you mentioned that. But also
Yes.
the 2 grantees, RCAC and Great Lakes RCAP, who had grants for the 2019 cycle, they've been extended. So they're actually able, was that a year extension? That was my question.
Yes, it is. It's a year
Okay.
extension. So they'll go until the end September 30th of 2021 as well.
Right. And so 4 of the 6 RCAP regions are able to give you loans now. And actually it's 5, because Communities Unlimited, which is based, I think their headquarters is in Arkansas, but it's Central South, so Texas and Alabama, Louisiana, all that area. They're also doing the area that the Midwest Assistance Program, which is another RCAP region, which is further north, is Missouri, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota. Communities Unlimited is managing the program for MAP as well, as far as you're eligible in those states through Communities Unlimited. So there's actually 5 of the 6 regions that you can get a loan from if you meet all the qualifications, as Derek laid out. Thank you. That's awesome. And Derek's going to stick around. And again, we would prefer you put the questions in the question box or the chat box, and Katie's going to make a list of those, and we'll get to them at the end. Okay, can you hear? Hopefully everybody heard all that. It just muted me for some reason. Okay, so a couple things, and I still call this the HWWS program because I wasn't paying close enough attention on it when I looked on their website, on Derek's website. So it's really just for residences. Business organizations can't apply. So like a small rural church can't apply for these loans. And it's only for wells. I want to make sure this is all true, Derek, is why I'm bringing it up. It's really not for springs or cisterns, because we get questions about those as well. And the other message I have for everyone is, especially if you're with a health department or some professional group that's working with well owners, find a community action agency or a similar nonprofit in your area and encourage them to apply, because I know there's certainly a need, And as Derek showed you, there's some that are small. He mentioned 2 counties in Colorado to what the Water Well Trust is now able to offer those nationwide. And they're still limited. And so I know the Water Well Trust gets a lot of requests for this stuff. And so they have a waiting list, but getting $1 million this year, I'm sure is going to help with that. And so, yeah. And if you know of a nonprofit or part of a nonprofit, talk to Derek. That's the bottom line about how to get involved with this for next year. Because then the bottom line is, even with the grantees that are out there, there's still a lot more that could be done. And the more visibility, as he mentioned, the program gets, the more likely it is that Congress would allocate more dollars to it. And there's certainly a need, and I'm going to mention that several times. So hopefully I got all that right, Derek.
You sure did. You're right on it, Steve.
All right, thank you. Good deal. Okay, so I'm just going to show a couple of, mostly what I'm going to show you is examples. The truth of the matter is, outside of the USDA's program, there isn't a lot of opportunity out there, especially for getting a well drilled or repaired. And that's just the nature of, it's your private property, you're a landowner, you're a well owner, and you're expected to take care of that yourself. And one issue I will bring up is we run into cases where, like for instance, on our well assessment tool that we've developed that, folks can go out, work with somebody from RCAP and they'll go through things. One of the questions we ask is, how close are you to a public water system? Because we certainly run into folks who have either a really bad well and they can't afford to fix it, or they just don't have the wherewithal to take care of their well properly. If they're really close to a public water supply, it's really worthwhile to consider going to a public water supply. Now, if you are capable and you are able and all those things, I'm with you. You should want to have a private well, you should have one, and everything Derek said follows through with where I grew up and all that stuff. So what I'm going to do is just show some of the examples and places where we found information, both nationally, like the Water Well Trust, down to locally through Soil and Water Conservation District, for instance. And the rest of this presentation isn't just about repair of your well. It's also about treatment, abandoning wells, septic systems, and sampling, and everything we found. And why, the best thing you can do is be inquisitive and get online and see what's available. And so, for instance, we mentioned RCAC. They weren't listed there because they have an extension, but they currently offer 2 programs for well loans. One of them is it's still called the HWWS program because it's the 2019 dollars, but it's the funding from USDA, and it's still under the old rules. So as Derek mentioned, $11,000 and all that stuff. But they also have a separate program that they're funded straight through the state of California through the Water Resources Board, where they can offer residents in California more money to replace their wells. And this all came out of, this grant program came out of the drought that they had in California, and so many wells were going dry out there. And so here's the flyer for the Household Water Well program. And again, Cindy Elliott, who used to be in charge of this or was one of the officers of this program for RCAC, gave a presentation. You can find it on our website, but you can click on this flyer on there. And now the person is Deborah Almamazan, and I'm probably butchering that name. I haven't talked to her personally, and I apologize if I did. And then the other program is this one that's just for the state of California, and it's based on anyone with a household income of under $51,000, but you can get up to $45,000 for an individual well, or a small water system, which is defined as anything under 15 connections. So it's really a non-community supply, or a subdivision. Or I know we had a question from someone who's a System B, which is in Washington State anyway. Everything under 15 connections is called a System B. It's really a shared well system. And so in California, there's that ability, but it's just available in California. The Water Well Trust was mentioned. This is their press release from September 14th, or on their website, about the $1 million they got for the current grant that started October 1, and that they're able to go. And I believe Derek mentioned this, but this is the first time that there's been a nationwide grantee, which is awesome for the USDA's program. And so, if you go to their website, there's all kinds of information available. and you can contact them and get on their list. And again, there are income requirements for all of these types of resources. Derek mentioned the 504 program, which I should have listed it as that, but it's a separate program where you can apply directly to USDA, but to qualify, you have to be at a household income of 50% of your area median income. So it's it's only for folks who really have a need and can't afford it, but it can be for anything related to your house. It can be for a well, treatment, septic, windows, roof, anything home related. And if you're over 62, you can get up to $7,500 in grant funding to go along with the $20,000 in loan funding. And so it's really worthwhile. If you know of someone who's in that situation, I'll give you an example real quick. I was contacted by a neighbor of a gentleman who lived in Southern Illinois who still lived in his old homestead house and had a well, but didn't have indoor plumbing. He was 84, and in the end, he didn't want me to come on his property, so nothing ever happened. But this would have been a great program for him to get some of that stuff taken care of. He was on limited income, and some folks, he's just an independent gentleman, and in the end didn't want anybody to help him, and he was happy with the way things are. But he was in a situation where this program, he could have gotten the $7,500 and also more, up to $27,500 total if he would have done the loan. But we never got that far. But it sticks in my mind, one, because we really wanted to try to help this gentleman, and I understand how it is when he's lived there his whole life and he wanted to do things himself, and good for him. But I wish we would have been able to do something there. So here's that web page. I know Derek just showed the one for his program. This is a 504 page, and I was just giving you I should have put the URLs on here and I didn't, but you can Google this and get to these, and they're all interrelated. So under RD's programs and services. And then there's also stuff for emergency situations. When the flooding happened near Houston a couple years ago, FEMA's got information available, and the Texas Well Owner Network did a bunch of worked with Virginia Tech actually to do a bunch of sampling of wells that got flooded. And so using some of that information, folks could get funding from FEMA to repair their wells because of the flooding there. And I put in here, this is a good time to mention that we put a lot of these resources on a web page. And so if you go to our website, privatewellclass.org, and either highlight or click on resources, or just put in /funding, it'll take you to a web page that lists links to a lot of the stuff that we're talking about today and how to get to those programs. So here's FEMA's website. Down near the bottom here, it says types of assistance for home primary residents. And so depending on what the disaster is and what's happened, if it's been declared, I believe that then you're available for some of those things. And there's an application process for all that as well. And so kind of depends on your situation and what I'm trying to do with the presentation today. Some of these examples are actually even older. I know maybe a few years old, these screenshots, but they're the type of things that are available. We certainly couldn't list them all at a local level. And so we're trying to show some of these things that are there. For instance, Minnesota has both under their housing department and under the Department of Health have programs. This is an emergency access and accessibility program, depending on, it's if there's been some kind of emergency. But they also have other programs through their Department of Health. Here's another emergency program in Tennessee where you can, if there's been needed home repairs, again, it's not just for a well, but it's also, but it is for a well as well. And so my point here is you really need to go look and search, and we can help you with some of that, but we can't obviously do that for every single well owner and try to figure out what their situation is and what might be available. So what we're trying to do is get you started here. And this is the old one I mentioned. It's from November 2013, but this is the USDA local office who provided information about emergencies that had happened there. And so there's a cost share for this and for people who are hauling water. And this is more of an agricultural service, but it's, again, just an example of the type of thing that might be available. You just need to look. So again, this is not an exhaustive list, but there's also, we're trying to aggregate some information. There's special interest groups, or you may have special interest related to your well. For well abandonment, there's programs out there for septic systems and for testing. And so one thing we'd ask is, if we're going to try to keep a list of all this stuff together, if you know of any programs that we don't talk about today or aren't on our website, please let us know and we'll add it, so that this resource is better for everyone to use. And again, as a well owner, you need to really research this to find out what might be available for you. Or if you're trying to help a well owner and you're going to do the legwork for them, that's awesome. And you can start from there. So Minnesota Department of Health has these 4 types of loans: a housing repair in the box there, the emergency program we just talked about, a fix-up program, and an ag program. And so you can go to their website and search for this, and under their wells program. And it's about for sealing a well or treatment or construction. And it's meant to help keep everybody safe and provide resources that'll allow you to keep using your well. There's programs for specific groups, like this is from the Texas Veterans Home Improvement Program. They offer all these things are eligible improvements. And if you look under the W's, water conditioners, water coolers, water heaters, water wells. So there's and septic is there too, sewerage system. And so this is a program that's meant to help veterans in the state of Texas. And so they've got some dollars available to do those things. And again, it just depends on where you live and what information you can find. I live in Illinois, and I was able to find the resources I'm sharing today. And so it goes from there. The USDA also has a Colonias program. So if you live in Arizona, California, New Mexico, or Texas, and your area is designated as a colonia, then there's an extra program that's available, or additional program that may allow you to provide, get some resources to help improve your water supply there. I want to talk about abandoned wells just for a minute, because that's actually a huge issue for source water protection and protecting your well. If you live on a property that has more than one well and the other 2, say you have 3 wells and you're using one for water supply, but the other 2 are just sitting there, maybe have a board over them or some kind of cover, but they're not being used, you really need to seal those. Because they can become a source of contamination, or if somebody falls in, it can become a liability. You might be responsible, even if somebody's trespassing. And so, to protect the aquifer and protect your well, as well as for a safety reason, that's really important that you do that. These 2 pictures are again from the state of Washington's blog, Department of Ecology. And these are examples just in the state of Washington. One, they're trying to get a horse out of an old well where he fell in. And then the one on the bottom, this man that says Sheldon man falls 45 feet into well, he actually was pulled out and walked away. He very fortunate. That's a long way to fall. And so I'm sure, yeah, anyway. And the newspaper clippings over here, Illinois used to have a groundwater education coordinator. So all of these pictures, all these newspaper clippings are from the 90s. But the third one down, those of you old enough to remember, in Texas, Jessica McClure was a little girl, 18 months old, fell into a well. It was covered live on CNN. It took 20 some hours, I think, to get her out, but they finally dug her out. And now she's a grown woman and has kids of her own. But it's just, it made national headlines and was captured on national television. One of the few things that that way. These other 3 clippings are all in Illinois. And back in the 90s, before internet was pervasive and everything was on your phone, it wasn't as easy to find out information about other parts of the state or nationwide as it is today. And so, the folks in Galesburg versus Buffalo Grove, which is a Chicago suburb, and Sangamon County is Springfield, downstate where our state capital is, they probably didn't know the other things happened, and they all happened the same year. And so it's just it happens more than people realize, and it's why you need to get rid of your abandoned wells, or you need to abandon your unused wells that could be a source of, it could kill somebody, as the bottom line. There are other groups that are more like nonprofits. This one's called Know the Flow. They have a well sealing cost share program, and it's, talks about who to get to, and yeah, and I don't remember what county this is now, I apologize, but it's, I think it's in Minnesota. And so it's just a local group that's decided to put some dollars together and cost share those things. University of Nebraska has a program for cost sharing as well for wells. You know, in Nebraska, their state agency did a grout study that really should change the way the industry looks at even putting in wells. But these sorts of services are meant to help protect aquifers as well as the individual well and well owner by sealing these old abandoned wells. And there's application forms you can find out. So the cost share rate on this, I showed this is because it's 90%. So that means, you know, Illinois, like some of our soil and water conservation districts in Illinois have a 50% cost share up to like $600 or $700. So as long as you can get it done for under, you know, $1,200 or $1,400, they'll cover half. But this program is 90%, which means if it's $1,000 to abandon a well, you have to pay $100. That's a pretty good deal for peace of mind, for safety, for ensuring your well safe from someone dumping things down it, all that sort of stuff. Septic programs, you know, especially in the Northeast, this is in the Catskills, but there's a lot of issues there because bedrock's close to the surface, and a lot of times septic systems aren't put in properly, especially old ones. They were put in sometimes right on top of bedrock, and they contaminate aquifers. I visited New York, in the upstate New York area. There's several places where we ran into real water quality problems because the aquifer is the bedrock that's, you know, just right under land surface or at land surface, and septic systems there run right into the fractures in the bedrock and can move freely through that system and contaminate wells, you know, even miles away. And so depending on the type of rock and the situation. And so it's good to have these programs just because it helps locally protect even your water source for everybody. This is from Massachusetts.gov, and I'm going to run through these fairly quickly so we can get to our questions. But there's, you know, out east, as I mentioned, especially in the Northeast, because of the Chesapeake Bay Initiative and because of a lot of problems with septic systems, you know, Massachusetts probably has some of the strictest rules on septic systems, how they're installed, what type of system you can put in. You know, you have to do soil permeability tests and all kinds of other things that I know you don't have to do in Illinois, but you do in some other states. And so it all depends on, you know, they're called Title V systems there, but it's good to understand those issues and what might be available to you. And again, you know, I know especially RCAP Solutions, which is the Northeast RCAP, one of their staff is a environmental health professional himself and was a septic inspector for a number of years. And he's my go-to person when I have questions about septic systems, just because that's not my expertise. And so, you know, there's a lot of help available to you there that way too. Just some more examples. The West Virginia Housing Program has a on-site system loan program. Again, I mentioned the Department of Ag earlier from Minnesota. This is that information, and really this is meant to help ranchers, farmers who have livestock. And so it just depends. You know, even the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Authority has a homeowner septic program, and you can see the interest rate, and it's self-funded there. I don't think they're a USDA grantee, or maybe at one point they were, but I think this is a state-run program. And then there's groups. One of the questions we got today from someone on the webinar was mentioning Water Prosper, and this organization that is trying to help folks in Appalachia, and they provide treatment systems. And if you look on their website, you know, it's $3,500 for a treatment system that takes out everything that needs to be taken out, depending on types of systems there. And obviously, they're a nonprofit who's trying to help well owners in that area who can't afford it. And so there's a lot of ways. This is a group that, you know, I would recommend to them they consider looking into the USDA's program about becoming a loan officer for these low interest loans. Because, you know, there's a lot of groups out there. There just isn't a lot of, you know, stepping up to, one, be a loan provider, or two, even having the resources to actually help well owners. You know, a lot of times, even the water well trust, it's kind of one well at a time. it's just, it takes a lot of effort and wherewithal and to do those things. So I just want to point out there are nonprofits who are doing things ancillary kind of to the loan program, helping folks who are in low income areas and need support for, in this case, it's providing treatment devices for homes. There's also sampling programs. So in Florida, they have a lot of water quality issues and some of their shallow aquifers. And so they offer private well sampling. When the state's involved in this case, though, if they find like a plume of contamination, they may end up coming in and abandoning all the wells in that area and putting everybody on public water just because the groundwater is not safe. And it's the right thing to do. It's just, I know some people probably aren't that interested in that, even if it is not healthy. And really, the state's interest there is to protect human health, which should be all of our interest. And so it's really a great program in that respect. I know they put a lot of folks on community water, which is sampled regularly, maintained, all those things. But now, those folks have a water bill, which I'll get to at the end, but really everyone should have a water bill, whether you're on a private well or on a community water supply. If you really want to take care of your well and your infrastructure and all that stuff, you should be charging yourself every month and maintaining some sort of funds to take care of things when they arise. Soil and water conservation districts, I mentioned in Illinois. Here's a water testing cost share, and this is, for a given conservation district. Excuse me. Iowa's got a great program. Their state legislature authorizes funding to their counties, health departments, and the counties can choose. A lot of times it's either testing or it's well abandonment. But through that, they do a lot of private well testing and also abandon a lot of wells in Iowa because their state legislature stepped up and provided funds that the counties can apply for that. And yeah. And this is a state hygienic lab that's at Iowa, and you can see here they list some of those resources, including the grants to counties program, what to do, how to do it. They have a great lab there. They provide a lot of outreach and resources. They work with their contractors a lot. And so, it's really, I won't say an individual, but it's a individual organization level effort where some state labs don't get involved that much with some of this outreach and others do. And Iowa's a shining example, if you will, of how working with their counties, they can make a difference in the number of people that get wells tested and also have their wells abandoned. Soil and water conservation districts I mentioned, they'll do some testing for you. I know we had a question today about what about all the other constituents? When you're in a situation where you may have had contamination, that's a whole nother level of testing, especially for some of the things that are used either for fracking or through oil and gas or some of those things. Some of those things like even PFAS today are very expensive to test for. And so, getting some testing done, baseline testing, I know doesn't always settle everyone's issues. But I know like in some states, if you really have a known problem, and I know this might not work in West Virginia or some areas where there's, very well-known problems, but they're also very extensive. Because I think in Illinois, if you contacted our state health department with a real issue and, it smelled like gas or one of those things, the county health department would come out and do some testing. And I don't think they'd charge you for that. But it's just different everywhere. And that's kind of so are well owners, so are wells. It depends on, there's so many different things. That's why working with well owners can be so difficult in some cases, because every well's a little different, every aquifer is a little different, and the situation and issues you may have are certainly different. And so they almost have to be dealt with on a local level. I mentioned earlier on the emergency side that the Texas Well Owner Network was working with Virginia Tech. Well, they have a lot of resources available. They do workshops and they do sampling as part of their education program. So you can go to their well-educated or well-informed classes that are free, and you can have your well water screened And again, it's not a complete analysis of every constituent that could be in your well water, but it certainly looks at some of the basics, coliform, nitrate, and things that are a common problem in private wells that aren't sealed properly at the surface. And so it's still a worthwhile tool in that respect, as well as it's an opportunity for a free sample for those things. And you can ask questions and get advice from some very knowledgeable folks who work with well owners every day. And so we encourage you to do those things. This is just another example. Conservation District works with a well-educated program there. And so again, that's Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District. They're very active. The person who runs this program is very involved, even helping us. She comes to our conferences and let us know about the well owner group they started in the state of Indiana. And they're really trying to make a difference in the state of Indiana statewide by having this work group that's putting materials together and offering sampling. The state for a number of years was doing private well sampling, and there's reports available online about the general water quality in different parts of Indiana because of that. So it's they've subsidized some of these costs to make it worth your while. And that's the same with our lab in Illinois. A well owner still only, if it's not free anymore, it's still only $60 to get a set of samples if you're an Illinois resident, which is well under what it would cost if you went to a private lab, about a third to a fourth. So what I was trying to do there really is just show you the range of types of resources that might be available to you. And it really depends again on where you live. I also want to talk to you about our class and why it's important that everyone take it, either as a well owner or a professional. Some of you may have plenty of experience with wells and understand all this. That's great. But there aren't enough of us like that. And so we've learned from when we started this class, especially for EHPs, a lot of them haven't had access to classes specifically on private wells. And literally about 20% of the participants in our class, the 8,000 people that have taken it so far, are EHPs and other professionals. And so I want to go through quickly what's involved here and what we have available. And if I haven't mentioned it yet, everything related to our program is free. And that's we have a grant from RCAP and USDA US EPA that allows us to run this program. And we've had over 20,000 people take our webinars like the one we're on today, and over 8,000 people actually take the class, which you sign up for online, and it sends you a PDF once a week for 10 weeks. And so this is our front page, privatewellclass.org. And if you click on take our free class, you can learn that way, and that's the 10 lessons. Learn by video takes you to our webinars page, where you can either sign up for a webinar that we haven't had yet, or you can review a video of the webinars we've already done, like today's will be up by next week on our website and available to anyone. So if you click on, and also for each of the 10 lessons, there's more reading if you're interested. And the idea here is to provide support. So the lesson is only 6 to 10 pages long for each individual lesson. And if the material didn't resonate or some of the terms didn't resonate with you, here's some other resources. Like I'll point out here the 3rd and 4th bullet under the science of groundwater. Raymond Lyle developed these booklets for Cornell back in the 80s and early 90s. They're great. The diagrams he made, I use them in our class. They're just really useful to explain common groundwater issues and terms and how water gets in the ground and all that stuff. And so these are really worth going through. And if you're in a special situation, like I included the first bullet under number 2 there is the Michigan Flowing Well Handbook. Michigan was losing 28 million gallons a day of groundwater to the surface because of flowing wells. And so they passed a law and require those to be capped now so that they're under pressure. And that handbook has everything in it that you'd ever want to know about a flowing well. It's useful to you whether you're in Michigan or in some other state. Obviously, the rules that Michigan has to follow are specific to Michigan, but just how you can cap a well, what things you should know about a flowing well. I know we have 2 areas in Illinois where we have flowing wells in some cases, and it depends on the year and how wet it is and some of those things, but it's just useful stuff. We also record all our webinars. We do I show this one because we do a septic webinar once a year, every July. We bring in a septic expert. I mentioned the guy, Jim Starbird from RCAP Solutions, to help us answer questions. But it talks about everything you need to know about maintaining your septic system, some things that people do that aren't necessarily needed, and just how to take care of it and why it's important for your well. We also do things on specific topics like lead. Now, the last one we did on lead was in 2018. This is a specific webinar on funding and financing. We don't do this very often, but they're recorded and they're available. And we've done now over 70 of these webinars, and they're useful. Even if 2 webinars are about the same topic, the back part of that where the questions are usually different, and so there's some value to be gained from any of those. And for some of the pages like funding, I mentioned the funding earlier, we also have one for lead. So there's so many well owners don't understand the difference between lead and what happened in Flint, Michigan with their system, which is a community water supply, and what can be an issue for a private well owner that is concerned about lead. That's why we did the webinar in the first place, and we also put these resources available. Lead can be a premise plumbing issue, which means the plumbing in your home. And so it really depends on the water quality coming in your home, whether or not lead is going to leach from those pipes. In some cases where the pH is correct and the water is not aggressive or corrosive, you can have lead pipes and they have scale buildup on the inside, and there is no lead issue at all, and you're fine having lead pipes. But in other cases, that's not the case. And so it's about knowing those differences and what to do. And if you're concerned, if you have lead pipes, where you can, like the filter issue, you can put filters on your kitchen tap that will remove the lead, and they work really well, and all that sort of thing. What to know is there's also, I think now there's maybe 19 videos we have that we call quote training videos. They're 4 to 6 minutes long, and they talk about one specific topic, like a shared well. So if you're on a well that you share with another homeowner, if you don't have any kind of legal agreement or it's not in the deed to your property that you'll share that, your neighbor, if the well's on his property, their property, they may decide to sell their property, and a new person comes in and decides they don't want to share their well anymore, and you're just out of luck. And so it's just a short video about all the complications of being on a shared well. It happens a lot more than I realized, and we get questions about it all the time. And so even for a small subdivision, we see contractors who are trying to skirt the Safe Drinking Water Act, which requires more than 15 homes on a well to be a community water supply. And so they put a well every 5 homes. It saves them money not having to put a well on every property, and they don't have to worry about it being a public water supply, which is really a terrible thing to do, but that's happened a lot in many states before that was, for folks realize that, and they've changed that law so that can't happen anymore. So it's those kind of useful things. What is a sand and gravel aquifer? What is a sand and gravel well? Why does my pressure tank keep losing pressure? Why does my well keep losing pressure? It's because your pressure tank. Our video, it's called How Does My Pressure Tank Work? Is by far the most popular video on our website. It's had like 350,000 hits in 3 or 4 years. And that's, tells us 2 things. One, there's not a lot of information out there about pressure tanks, and 2, a lot of people on private wells have pressure problems. And so not knowing how to set the pressure on that and maintain it and ensuring that your pressure tank is working correctly, it may be very old. If it's not a bladder tank, if it's the old air tank, for instance, and you're still putting air in it, you probably need a new tank. And so there's just a lot of helpful information like that. We even have podcasts. Of the first 3 there are the first 3 lessons in the class, and the other 3 are from interviews I did with RFD Illinois, which is a rural farm radio network through Illinois Farm Bureau. And it's just talking about different issues related to private wells in rural areas. Excuse me, I'm gonna lose my voice here in a little bit, I think, which may be a good thing. The entire class is also available in Spanish. And so if you're interested in, there's the URL at the bottom in Spanish. We were fortunate being at the University of Illinois to have a young man who was here getting his PhD in civil engineering from Columbia, the university, or not the university, but the country. And he translated the entire thing, including the figures, into Spanish for us. And the goal of our program really is to be outreach and education. It's meant to help you understand what things you need to know and what advice you need to be aware of, and so that you can, not aware of, but you need to know why your well is important, why you need to understand how it works, so that you can help protect yourself and your family from risk. Because a private well, most private wells work great. If you have a newly installed well and it meets code, and you've tested it and there's no water quality problems, in a lot of areas, groundwater is perfectly safe, but you don't know if you don't test. You can't assume by looking at it or smelling it. And it's really important that you do those things and do your due diligence to be a good steward of your water supply, just like your community does if you're on a public water supply. And so we're gonna get to the questions. Again, if you have questions, and we don't get to them today, you can ask them in the question box and we'll stay and answer those. Or if you have questions based on some of the things we've said today, you can ask that there too. And so we're going to go through a few of those today, or I am here. There were a number of webinar related questions this time. So, closed caption, I'm deaf. Okay, we had someone contact us 3 or 4 months ago saying that they wanted captioned videos. So we took all 70 of our videos and sent them off to be captioned. But we can't do that for each one individually. It's more effective for us to do it every 6 months or so. So what I can offer to you is that the webinar we're doing today, at the end of the year, we'll send those off to get captioned. And so early next year, all our videos going back will be captioned. It's been brought up, the idea of us having them captioned for when we deliver them. We don't have a script. We don't have the manpower to develop a script in advance for everyone and provide that. I do this off the cuff most of the time, and I don't see, I just don't have the time. I'll be honest. We're trying to do a lot of different things, and so we are captioning our videos, but there'll be a 6-month delay. We're going to try to do it every July and December, every June and December. If you didn't receive a certificate for one of our past webinars, contact us, not through this question submitted for the webinar. We don't look at these until a few days before because we're trying to prepare the webinar. And so that's something you should send to our email, and the email is listed below. And the same, I think I've already answered how many credits are these and do they cost? There's no cost for anything in our program. And our credits we offer are for NEHA. And I think that was mentioned at the beginning, but it's usually an hour and a half, 1.5. And we also are a licensed Illinois LEHP provider. And so we request that those be, that these webinars also are allowed for Illinois LEHP credit. We've had a number of folks ask about us doing this in other states. And again, the problem becomes every state has different rules on becoming a provider to offer CEs or CEUs, and we don't have the staff or the bandwidth to do that. And so, NEHA is a great partner. Many states allow NEHA credits to count for their state. And so we've developed even a version of our class, which I forgot to mention, that's on NEHA's e-learning portal. And so you can go there and take our 10-lesson class. And if you're an EHP, you can get an hour of CE credit for each one. And that's what we recommend you do. And so, again, my point is you'll get a lot quicker answer if you email us instead of putting these in the questions for the webinar. And Katie monitors that email address every day, every work day. And so typically she responds the same day. So anyway, okay. So is there funding available for adding treatment to our water system? So I added this in, even though that's what we've been discussing for the last hour, because most of the questions were related to funding. And that was the whole point of the webinar. Hopefully we've addressed that. And again, I hope we've provided a good overview of the options and given you some tools to determine what you might be able to find. It really is different in every location, and it really depends on your household income in most cases. And so some of them are cost share no matter what you what your household income is, but especially the grants and the low interest loans from USDA or their grantees are going to be based on those issues. And USDA is really the only big player I should have put there for financing private wells. It'd be great to see more dollars available through their program or other programs or state programs developed to do that. And so, it's a big deal that the Water Well Trust got $1 million to work nationwide, because in the past they had to pick specific areas to work in, and they could only offer loans to folks in those areas. And so it really opens it up, and we hope to see they can expand their bandwidth and availability to actually do more loans. Then that's going to be a great model for others to possibly follow, or to help them expand at the Water Well Trust. So is financing worth it? What are the benefits of financing? Well, certainly if you can take advantage of 1% financing, that's awesome, because it's just not available anywhere else, but it's worth it regardless to have a safe drinking water supply, and to remove any kind of threat to your well water quality. And so, if you're on like the well I grew up on, my dad had no interest in ever changing our well, just the way it is. Even after I left home and told him that his well wasn't safe and no one should be drinking it, what I told him is he shouldn't let his grandkids drink it if they're over at his house, over at our house, and that sort of thing. But it's worth, one, it's also for your property value or resale value of your home. If you don't have a good well, we do a webinar just for realtors, and we tell them, whether you're the buyer or the seller, here's why it's important to test your water first. And I tell anyone who's buying a home, don't buy a well, or don't buy a home with a well unless you've tested it, because it'll bite you. And many cases of that I could go through. But you should want to have your well safe. It should be a priority, because you're really trying to protect your family's health, and having clean water is just an important part of. You don't realize what you don't have until all of a sudden you don't have a well, or your well doesn't work. Then all of a sudden you realize how valuable it is, and that's what happens. It's out of sight, out of mind. It's always there, and you got to look at it a different way. So this is a shared well issue. Are there any grants or low interest loans we could qualify for as a 3-party Class B water system? I'm assuming you're in Washington State, because I know they have a Class B water systems, or those that are under 15 connections. And so I'm assuming there's 3 homes. There's no records of any maintenance, even though if you read through this, it looks like there were maintenance funds, and the previous well owner that they bought the house from kept those. And so the only option I see for you, other than what we've already described, is because Washington State classifies a special type of public water system as a Class B water system, there may be a way to use SRF funding, which is reserved for community water supplies, for them to give you an eligible loan through that. And those are also low interest, or not 1%. And I don't know, it depends. I know the SRF program, it provides several $1 billion to the states that are then the loan officers for communities for large infrastructure projects. But some of those rules have been laxed a little bit in the last few years to allow the SRF money to be used for things potentially like this. But you'd have to talk to the Department of Health in Washington. They're the folks that regulate public water supplies, and that's the only thing I could think of that might benefit you there. But I do want to bring up what I said before about shared wells. You need to have some kind of legal agreement in place, or it needs to be in the deed, so that you can have a separate fund set up, because the quickest way for you and your neighbors to no longer like each other is to have a pump fail, and all of a sudden it's going to cost $3,000, and you have to go to your other 2 neighbors and ask them for $1,000 each they don't have and they don't want to give you. And so it's to protect yourself and your neighbors, and just, it's important that every homeowner who's on a shared well have something to protect them, so that they have an assured water supply. Can I advise local residents about the information I learn? We hope you do. So this program's free, it's unbiased, and it promotes best practices. That's our entire goal. We're very fortunate to have the funding we have, so that we don't have to sell anything or charge for anything. And really, as I mentioned before, the biggest issues we find related to wells and poor water quality are that safe drinking water, or old construction that isn't safe, so it allows things to get in at the surface, and a lack of well owner knowledge, and this should say and education, about how to take care of their well. And so many times it's just people don't understand that their well's at risk. They don't understand that they need to sample, all those sorts of issues. So the more people that, take our class and at least learn the basics, it's going to raise up the level of knowledge that we have in the country about our private wells, and it'll help people ask better questions, realize they can rely on their local health department or local lab or extension to get help, and they're not on their own. And I really truly believe this. If we could do those two things, bring all the wells that are don't meet current well construction code up to code, and somehow raise the level of well owner knowledge, we could solve over 80% of the private well issues we have in the country. And that's not everyone. I mean, if you're in an area where you have, some kind of contamination or whatever, that's still an issue, where there's natural occurring contaminants like arsenic. But many times it becomes it's an old well. I mean, we can literally show you hundreds of pictures of wells that aren't safe and that people use, where they've got a 6-inch steel pipe sticking up and they've got a coffee can over the top of it, or there's a gap of a 1/2 inch or 2 inches over, and there's boards covering a well where rats, snakes, anything else can fall in a well. And so we certainly encourage you to share our information and encourage well owners to utilize our program. And we try to answer questions and get you support in addition to that. So there's a lot of other questions that were listed today that weren't related to funding and financing. And so I picked out a few that were really related to things that if you took our class, you'd know the answer to this already. And so I just listed these 3 here. What is the updated checklist for annual well maintenance for private well owners? We go through a whole set of best practices, and it's either lesson 5 or 6 on what you need to do. And if you're putting in a new well, what you should look for. Why does a well water have to be 50 feet from a sewer system? Well, it needs to, there's a whole list of things that your well should be separate from, because it's a potential contamination source, including a sewer system. And I'm assuming you mean a real sewer system, like a community sewer system, not a septic system, but it's the same for either one. You don't want anything near your well that can cause contamination. And I have elevated coliform, what can I do about it? Well, if you've tested, then there are a number of things you can do. And again, we go through all of that. We have actually some of our other classes, or our other webinars are specifically about answering that question. And so we encourage you to look at our videos and answer it there. I'm not going to take the time today. It's a series of slides on how to chlorinate your well and a lot of other things that you can do to make sure your well's safe. So this question, please provide an example of a scam that homeowners or regulators need to be aware of, how to recognize a scam in advance. So I just want to say that in any profession, no matter what it is, there's always going to be a few bad apples. So if someone says, well, you can't trust a treatment person or you can't trust a well driller, that's just absolutely not true. There are some that I've heard cases where there's certainly an issue and they have scammed people or not been fully honest about things. And so you need to do your due diligence. Check out the company, do your homework. If it's going to be you adding a treatment device, make sure it's certified either by Underwriters Lab, National Sanitation Foundation, or the Water Quality Association. They're third-party certifiers that make sure treatment devices do what they say they'll do. So if it's certified under one of those 3 organizations, under ANSI Standard 53, let's say, which I believe it's either 53 or 58 are the 2 for arsenic. One's for filter devices and one's for RO, reverse osmosis. You don't buy a device that's an RO system that doesn't meet ANSI standard, I think it's 58 or 53. And that's how you do your due diligence and you make sure. We do see sometimes where people have unnecessary treatment, where someone's come out and done a litmus test and said, oh, your water's got a pH down in the, the 6s, it's kind of corrosive. You need to do this and that and that. Or fad devices, like, a couple years ago, there was these people selling things that are making your water more alkaline. Well, alkalinity is just a pH measurement. Over 7's alkaline, under 7 is acidic. And so we see groundwater that ranges from over 8, which is alkaline already, to below 4, which is very acidic and likely to be more corrosive. And so, it isn't some magic thing that's just going to make your water better or make you more healthy. Another thing we see a lot is septic additives. If you actually take care of your tank and you maintain it and pump it and put the only things you're supposed to down your tank, you shouldn't need to add any additive to your septic system. And every time I say that, I get emails from people almost like hate mail saying, well, I've added this to my system and I haven't had to pump it for 20 years. And my response to you is, it's probably a big tank, and just wait, because it's eventually going to fill up. And if you don't pump it, it's going to back up into your house or come out of the ground and cause a real problem for you. And so just you need to do due diligence, and you can ask for references. Make sure it's people that that's the best way. And if you're going to drill a new well, have a legal agreement so that you're well, so that the drilling company is going to do everything they're supposed to do. They're going to disinfect the well when they're done. They're going to take a water sample, that it's guaranteed work, all of those sorts of things. And there's a lot of this information available on the web. And so that's some of the examples I could think of. What if I can't afford to replace a well or repair my well? Well, I understand that's a lot of us today. Replacing a well could cost $40,000. I don't know anybody that, I don't know very many people that could just do that. And so that's why you need to be prepared. And being a well owner is a responsibility. You're the owner operator of a very small water system. So just like a small community where everybody pays a water bill every month, so that whenever they need big changes or there's a water main break and they have to replace a pipe, they've got the money to actually do that and pay their staff and buy the new pipe and all that. You need to put funds towards your well every month. Doesn't matter, even if it's just a little bit, so that someday when your pump fails, even if it's not for 10 years, or so that you can sample every year and have the money available to pay for a sample analysis, you've got the water to do that. People think water is free, and it is. Water is free. It's in the ground. You can pull it out, but there's a cost to pumping it, having the infrastructure, the piping and stuff in place to get it to your home and make sure you have water pressure, and to test it to make sure it's safe, or if it's not safe, to add treatment so that it can be safe. It's really undervalued by everyone, not only in the private well industry, but in the community public water supply industry. Most people don't realize how great having public water is until they don't have it someday, and all of a sudden they have to boil their water for a few days. Then all of a sudden it clicks that, man, you can't do anything without water. And so, two examples I was going to share is, one is a family living off the grid in Alaska. They've got a satellite thing so they can participate in our class and our webinars. They've sent me a number of letters saying, talking about how they chose to live that way. They actually used to live on the East Coast. They moved and went to a totally different lifestyle. But what it takes to be a well owner has just amazed them. And it's really great to hear that they've taken that up on their own. And the colleague south of town, I had a colleague here that worked at the U of I that was going to buy a house out in the country just south of Champaign-Urbana. And we know that or I knew that there was arsenic in the groundwater in the shallow aquifer there. And so I told them, I said, don't buy your house until you've had the water tested. And so they did, and sure enough, the health standard for a community water supply is 10 parts per billion for arsenic. Their well water was at 73. So they really, they said, what do we do? And I said, well, you have to add treatment to reduce it, but you should check and see where the community water supply, how far it goes, because they're really close, and so I thought, it'd be worth your while, in my opinion. They plan to have kids, they're a young couple. It'd be worth it, in my opinion, to add to see if the community water supply could run a line to their house and what that would cost, because you have to sample it regularly. You have to, if you buy an RO unit, you've got to maintain it and change out some of the stuff in that every once in a while. It wastes a lot of water. There's a lot of reasons why treatment, it can be done, but it's not necessarily, it takes a lot of effort from the owner themselves. And sure enough, the water lines ran across the road. And so they paid, I think, around $4,000, which they had, to run a water line to their house, and now they're on a community water supply. And I think it's the best investment they could have ever made, because they just spent a lot more than $4,000 over the life of living there to maintain that, to sample, to upgrade treatment equipment when it's necessary, to test it to make sure it's actually working, all those sorts of things. And so you need to look at your own situation, and you may not have that option, but then you need to be prepared to actually learn and take care of your well. And so with that, that's the last question that I'm going to answer on that part of things. And I'm going to bring this up, and I apologize, I didn't have this ready. So I'm going to make this larger and full screen. Yeah, and the person who brought this up about Water Prosper, I understand your situation. Hang on a second. There's a lot of folks around the country that are disadvantaged and poor, and I understand, especially organics are very expensive to test for, and so I added Water Prosper to our slide deck just because of the question you asked. And so, it's a very worthwhile endeavor that Water Prosper's undertaken. And, you're one of the good guys, obviously. And so, I wish everyone the best. We don't provide any kind of funding. We don't have it. And, it's a matter of getting the word out, which is one reason why I included your website today. So, keep up the good work. And I understand there's a lot more need than there are resources available. Are there guidelines as to what RCAP can spend money for testing? Yes, there are. We have to submit a proposal, and I'm part of the RCAP's grant in advance, and it's meant to be outreach and education and technical assistance. And so they may be doing a little limited sampling, but in the cases where they've done that in the past, it's because they have a partner at a local or state level that actually pays for the sampling, and they've done the the assessment and helped the well owner with the results and gave them the advice and education they need. So you need to talk to RCAP directly about what's going to happen in future grants. But all that's done, like the grant that just started for us October 1, that goes for 18 months, we submitted the proposal for that over a year ago. And so, it's set as to what can be done. And again, it's meant to be more outreach and education, just because, as I mentioned earlier, outreach and education are two things that are also really needed to help people understand how to take care of their well. It's intimidating if you don't know much about your well, but if you learn enough that you realize it's, one, interesting, and two, it's something you can do. In some cases, some of the stuff you can do yourself, it's worthwhile. And email us and I can discuss that more with you, or ask RCAP to respond to you. Okay, I'm not sure why that's showing up. Can the funds be used to abandon a shallow well? Well, not from the USDA program, I don't believe. And Derek, maybe you have a better answer for that. Maybe next year it could be. The 504 money probably could. And then some of these local programs are specifically for abandoning wells. And yeah, and so that's where we're at with that. Go ahead,
correct. Derek. You're correct, Steve. Our funds are strictly for refurbishing or repairing or replacing, not for abandoning. The 504 program will be a better avenue for that particular project.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, if I haven't mentioned or made it clear, none of these options are things that we personally or my program can actually fund. We just don't have that written into the grant. And it's, again, I know there's a lot of need out there. And so, and which is why we work with a lot of professionals, because they can reach a lot more well owners than we can ourselves. Can the funds also be used to help connect someone with a contaminated well to public water? I know there are programs for that. Derek, again, I don't think your program can, but I'm sure the 504 program could be, and there might even be state programs for that. I know Florida does that.
There are state programs. Our program, once again, would not be used for that. And you may also want to check your water system, because sometimes they do offer financing options to get hooked up to public water, just depending on the distance that they would have to run a line.
That's a good point. Yeah, never thought about that. Okay. Oh, good question. Derek, do the requests, meant to ask that, do the requests exceed $6 million? So you had 6.4 million.
Unfortunately, we did not. This past year, we had, with the 5 applications that we did select, the total outlays was $1.2 million. So there's still a lot of money out there. Actually, I'm sorry, $2.1 million. I said 1.2, $2.1 million. So there was still a lot of funds left out there. So that's why we're really trying to get the word out there. So as you mentioned, Steve, some of those smaller RC&D groups, community action groups, uh, if they're interested, this will be a wonderful time to apply because we do have those funds that carried over, that should carry over to next year's funding. So there should be a great opportunity for funding if there are organizations interested.
Yeah, and if you want to talk to even one of the folks who have applied, one of the grantees, we can certainly, or Derek can hook you up with, any of the RCAP groups that are currently funded and the people there. I know he works with them all closely, and so they can give you advice and tell you what it takes to do and all that sort of stuff. But it's certainly a worthwhile thing. It'd be great to see all that money spent every year. I meant to ask that question. I appreciate whoever did that because I forgot to. Okay, can local or state government apply for the decentralized water system grant?
No, they cannot, state or locals, but what we have seen is that if there are divisions of local governments that have set up a nonprofit leg, which some of them have, you have, like I mentioned, RC&Ds, which are sometimes developed under the arm of a local government, but they are a nonprofit organization. They can apply for it through those means, but not directly through the state or local government.
Okay. I work for a fairly recognized tribe located in central Washington. We've had 2 devastating wildfires where septics and wells may have been affected. Would this funding be of help? Go ahead.
Definitely, this will be an opportunity for you to reach out. RCAC, I believe, services Washington State.
Yes.
And you can get in contact with them if you want to. I believe their information was up there. If not, please reach out to me and I can give you a contact for the program there within the RCAC and a contact person. So please definitely reach out to me for that information.
Yeah, and I know I've worked some with IHS, and I don't know. It might be worth contacting your IHS local contact too, or maybe you already have. I'm not exactly sure how all their rules work, but I know when I went to New York State, that's who I was working with on some tribal lands where they had a lot of well contamination because of septic systems. So they may be able to help as well. It's at least worth asking, I would think. So, okay, could you clarify, does RCAC have funds for wastewater system repair replacement through the decentralized program?
They do not currently have funding for septic or wastewater systems this year. The program will take effect, that septic system component will take effect in October of 2021. So that's when that septic systems as well as subgrants will go into effect for the programs, but not this year. They do not currently have funding.
Right. So in comparison to other states identified, do you know what the average cost of a new 300-foot well in Northern Illinois runs? It really depends. And I've been a number of years out of the water well business per se. I used to drill monitoring wells, and I had a much better appreciation for what it costs per foot in Illinois. But I honestly, I would guess 15,000, but I could be off by a significant amount. The best thing to do is to contact a couple drillers. And I know in Illinois, it's the Drillers Association. It's called the Illinois Association of Groundwater Professionals, IAPG. And their website lists all the contractors that are members. You can also go to NGWA's website and you can look by state at all the contractors that are members of NGWA. One reason to do that would be that they have a master well driller program at NGWA, and that's an actual extra class, if you will, that a driller has to go through to become certified, and it's kind of an extra, thing they have that says that they're qualified and have some skills. And so, and then I would call 2 or 3 that are in your area and ask them for an estimate. So that's really the best way to do that. And again, I haven't actually helped drill a well since the 90s. So it's been a while, and I don't have a good feel for that these days. It's an expensive thing, that's for sure. If our water rights are described in our deed, does that mean the water rights are part of our property? You know, I don't know enough about the legal issues there. I mentioned that because you need some kind of protection. It's not about the, I think it has to be in all the, I would talk to someone in your state there about what's allowed, or but if you're, I would say, and I'm assuming, so if you're in a Western state, water rights are a different animal than what I'm talking about for a shared well. And I believe they are. So, you know, if you're in a Western state where, you know, it's the first and right rule, if you will, then if you have a water right, then it's yours and it is tied to your property, is my understanding. But I'm not a legal person. And what I was referring to was more about described in sharing a well. And so I'm not sure the complications there if it's a water right state, if that's even possible. So I apologize for not having an answer. That's a good question. If I take your class, do I get documentation or a certificate for taking your class? Tennessee requires drillers and installers to obtain 5 hours continuing education each year. Could drillers use your class to obtain CEUs? How can they document a person taking a class? So, yeah, Katie answered this already, but you can't, to me, you can't get credit for it unless you take a quiz. And so what I would suggest is that you talk to your continuing education person in Tennessee and show them the class that's available on NEHA's website. So it's on NEHA, which is the National Environmental Health Association's website, but we already know that home inspectors use it and also can get CEUs through it. The way we've set this up with NEHA is it's free to take each lesson. You do have to sign up or create a registration and have a login, but you don't have to pay any kind of fee. And in the end, there is a certificate, and there's also a quiz at the end of each one. So you have to pass the quiz in order to get credit for that hour. And so you could ask your continuing education folks in Tennessee to take a look at that and decide how many hours they'd count it as. I know in Illinois, our LEHP person only offers, I think they only give it 3 hours of credit. And I might be thinking about the wrong thing here, but you know, it's up to the person who's making those decisions at the state. But that's what I would do. And we can certainly work with you. So the email address is still valid in that respect, and get you to the webpage on NEHA's website. Uh-oh, what did I just do? Okay, another funding source is the Indian Health Service. Thank you. Eligibility includes being American Indian, member of a tribe. Wells are 100% paid, is not a loan, and no income requirements. Thank you, whoever provided that. They seem like pretty helpful folks in my dealings with the Indian Health Service. And so that's an awesome service if that's being offered. And I appreciate whoever submitted that and added that in. Okay, well, that looks like that's the last question. Derek, thank you very much for sticking around and providing all that input and describing your program. And Katie, thanks for all you do every month for this webinar. And thanks for sticking around for those of you that have. And you know, we'll be a webinar next month. Take a look on our website. Thanks again, and everybody stay safe. Derek, I'm going to lose you because when I end this, it ends the whole thing. So I apologize.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, take care. Stay safe.
Take care.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye.